Hey guys, what's going on? Cyber Fury here, bringing you guys some AMS2 for the first time to the channel. This gameplay here is from the beta testing of AMS2 on LFM, or Low Fuel Motorsports, and happened a little while ago when the 1.6 update dropped and everybody kind of lost their minds. This particular race took place in the Ginetta G40s over on Kansai East. And I will admit, this is probably one of the cleanest LFM races I've been a part of. I don't know if this was just luck of the draw or if this was kind of more of a consistent staple with the AMS2 chapter of LFM. But for whatever reason, this race in particular was pretty clean, and you'll see instances later in this race of people that are abiding mostly by blue flag rules, and if they spin out or crash, then they hold the brakes, and it was overall just a really enjoyable experience. Now, I'm sure I'll figure it out soon enough if this race just happened to be a somewhat clean anomaly, or if this is more of the status quo with AMS2, but let me know down below what your experience has been with LFM so far on AMS2. It's been around now for about a couple months, so plenty of time to have a lot more experiences in it and a lot more kind of difficult or different scenarios, as we see the red car spinning out on the left hand side there and in kind of an unfortunate situation. Now, of course, I'm not going to complain too much, as that bumps me up an extra spot going from P4 where I qualified to P3, so on the podium so far. Let's just see if we can go ahead and hold that position. Now, I am very new to AMS2 specifically. I picked up as part of that 1.6 patch big hype trend that went around the internet, where you seemingly could not escape the news of AMS2 in some way, shape, or form, whether people were speculating about it or reviewing it or whatever else was happening there. But I did know that LFM having an integration for AMS2 was going to be massive, so I definitely wanted to hop on and give it a go, as up until this point, all I really knew about AMS2 was that it was an immaculate VR game. It ran incredibly smooth, it looked really good for the amount of specs you need to run it, and of course the cars were, as many people said, super slidey. Now, I don't know if you noticed it as part of the external cam different shots that we have throughout this video, but I did notice while driving that the car does have a tendency to slide around quite a bit around certain corners. Now, I'm not 100% sure if the tire model is applied to every car throughout the game. I've heard rumors that it's only certain cars, or some cars are still on the old patch, or what's going on. I know that AMS2 has been receiving a few more patches since this footage was recorded. So if anybody does actually know what the case is here, let me know down below. I also don't know if this might just be car track combo, or if this is actually kind of a handling characteristic of the Ginetta. Obviously, being North America based, I've never even seen one of these cars, so you know, driving them is going to be such a huge stretch. But I was pretty curious to know whether or not this actually was realistic. So I decided to do what any modern person would do and jumped immediately into scouring the internet to try and find some footage of these cars going around a track, or at minimum some onboard, to see whether or not these characteristics actually were a part of this car. And what I found might shock you or might not, but from the footage that I found of the Ginetta Junior Championship that exists out there, these cars actually do seem to slide around quite a bit. They're not super planted in a lot of these high-speed corners, and they do end up kind of gliding a little bit across the track. So, happy enough to say that even if this car isn't specifically on the new AMS2 tire model, it's not too much of a stretch to say that this thing is like trying to drive it on ice compared to like a real car, or how the real cars seem to handle. So in my mind, it's more non-issue than I thought it might initially be. Right here, we can see an instance of sort of the clean race mentality that was happening during this race. These guys, I guess, came together in some way, shape, or form and ended up spinning each other, or something happened there, but they both intelligently just hold the brakes until there's actually a break in the traffic before they decide to move. I've had plenty of races in other classes where you have guys just trying to immediately move, which then contributes to a result of half the grid ending up in a giant pileup. So props to them for following procedure. Now, the two guys in front of me have been having one hell of a battle this whole race so far, and I figure right now is my chance to get in close as one goes off track. But as he rejoins, I wanted to keep with the spirit of the cleanliness of this race as I stopped right in front of the Club Sport sign, which gave me a chuckle as I thought that would have been kind of the perfect transition into a sponsor spot, but maybe one day. We'll keep our fingers crossed. So as we take a couple more looks here from different camera angles, you can see that ultimately what ends up happening is as the car in front of me rejoins, I let off the gas, which kind of throws the weight of the car forward a little bit. And I can't remember exactly if I tapped the brake or not out of a bit of a panic move. And that just ends up unsettling the car way too much. The car was already loose, so by doing that, you just completely throw any traction you have on the back tires out the window. So after waiting a brief moment for a break in traffic, I rejoin off the racing line to get back up to speed before eventually going back onto the racing line, which results in me being P5. A couple laps later, as I'm trying to make up the time here that I lost from the spin, I end up behind this guy here who is actually a back marker. And as you can see around the track, the blue flags are flying, and I know that in my mind he should be moving over to let me pass here, but at the same time it's up to the passing car to do it safely. Now I'm not sure if on that corner he was trying to let me go at that particular moment, but he does eventually hit the brakes and move over to clearly indicate that he wants me to get past him and to let me go here. Not sure if this guy was just thinking, man, the guy behind me has no idea what he's doing or just can't read the room, but props to him for making it obvious eventually for me to pass him and for keeping it clean while doing so. One thing I wanted to mention as part of my research project into the Ginetta Junior Championship was that I ended up falling in love with this car through driving it in AMS2 and watching all of the race highlights I was able to find online. Coming onto the straight in lap 13 going into lap 14, you might have noticed that the black and green car was off track and rejoined. Him and the blue car next to me now are actually back markers. So I'm trying to find my shot to get around these guys as soon as possible. But going into T1, this is where I mess up and don't have a lot of situational awareness, which ultimately results in me spinning as well as the black and green car that was just off track not too long ago. The problem that I had here was as we were barreling down the straight into T1, I thought that the blue car that was next to me was still next to me, but as we can see on the replay, he was nowhere near there. So me taking the outside line there and compromising my approach to T1 was completely uncalled for. Now I do notice that the blue car on the bottom part of the screen there did kind of veer off track onto the grass, so I don't know if that was part of the evasive action to regain control of the car, but either way I'm still going to assume fault for that, for taking a dumb line on T1 of all places on this course. On the next lap, I did end up catching the blue car again, but as you can see here, he kind of veers off and slows down a little bit to let me pass, so kudos to him on a good move over as a back marker. And then 3 laps later, I end up on the tail end of another back marker who essentially does the same thing, kind of slows down a little bit, lets me pass. And this is what I mentioned in the start of this video, where everybody in this lobby, or at least everybody in the lobby that I interacted with for the most part, seemed to know what was going on and what the rules of racing were, as well as having that gentleman's agreement or kind of that more sportsmanship agreement to say, hey, I know that you're supposed to be in front of me here, so I'm not going to impede your progress, which is exactly the way it should be. So if you end up finding yourself as a back marker, take notes here, because this is what you're supposed to do. Maybe not to that extreme where you're going off on the grass, but you should give the passing car a clear way to get around you without having to put them in a position where they're compromising everybody's safety. However, after all was said and done, we ended up crossing the line in 7th place, so I qualified in P4, spent part of the race in P3, and ultimately spun to P5 and then spun again to P7. So not the most perfect race to introduce my LFM career on AMS2, but at least it was a fun race overall, and being a part of such a clean lobby really makes it stick out as one of the highlight races I have done so far, at least of recent time. Was it a fluke or was it a sign of things to come? We'll just have to stick around and figure that out as we race more on LFM, and especially more on AMS2. This game is great, it runs great, it feels really fun to drive, and of course it does great in VR, so I might dabble in some VR content very soon here, but we'll have to see how that goes. Let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in. It would be cool to try and combine the 2 mediums of part of this channel, which one part being VR, the other part being sim racing, and seeing if those can come together in a way that makes sense or in a way that might be interesting to people. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much. You are a rock star. If you did or didn't like the content, let me know down below. I'm always looking to improve if I can, and if you have some constructive criticism, I'd love to hear it. If you want to support the channel and follow my future adventures, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'm not going to force you one way or the other, I just appreciate you being here in general. But if you want to, go for it. I'm definitely not going to stop you. And while you're down there, definitely let me know if this is a more common occurrence in terms of race cleanliness on LFM with AMS2 versus ACC or AC, or if it's actually worse on AMS2 and you don't know how I got lucky getting into a lobby like this. I'm curious to see what the consensus is, but as I said, we'll probably figure it out soon enough as we race more on LFM with AMS2. I'm really excited for some of the future schedule that's coming up for this car, especially Laguna Seca. That's going to be so much fun. Links down below to social media, and as always, I hope to see you out there on the track. Thank you for being here. See you in the next one.